Next, we're going to talk about something in AK known as the hologramic subluxation or intraosseous subluxation, also known as bent bone. But first, a little preview of the model that this is based on. Hologram memory technique, as Dr. Walter refers to it. And I encourage you all to read, if you haven't already, read pages 16 through 25 in Dr. Walter's AK Synopsis, 2nd edition, Hologram Model of Nervous System and Memory. Fantastic overview of how the holographic or hologramic model, as he refers to it, can be applied to the function of the nervous system, and also how it can possibly help explain a lot of the phenomenon that we observe in applied kinesiology that really goes outside of our understanding of the basic neuronal pathways. A lot of AK can be explained or understood through neurology, but there's a lot that can't, at least as of yet. So the hologram memory technique is, and this is looked at a lot in from the perspective of neurobiology and memory and things like that in mainstream thinking. It's based on the premise that there is there's a phenomenon known as holism, and our DNA is a good example of that. We have all of the information in every cell for the whole organism. So basically, theoretically anyway, you could take one of our 40 trillion or 30 trillion, whatever it's considered to be these days, 30 trillion cells, and make a whole, it has all the genetic information to make the whole organism. And it's believed that the way we form memories and the way we process information through our memories and learning fits this, to some degree anyway, this holographic model. So when it comes to the body's matrix, the tissue matrix, it's believed that the brain has a holographic model of a given tissue, a cell, a group of cells, an organ, a bone, in this case a bone. Chronic stress on that bone distorts the matrix. And over time, the matrix actual model of the bone is incoherent, basically doesn't match with the brain's image, holographic image of the bone. And this can be found, there's a variety of ways, which we won't go into in the 100-hour course, but this can be found with applied kinesiology, with TL, and certain challenge techniques, which we'll go over here in just a little bit. Hologramic subluxation, bone can bend or torque when abnormal stresses are applied. This can be a factor in scoliosis. Wow, already 2 typos. It's only 8 o'clock in the morning. This can be a factor in scoliosis, genu-valgus conditions of the knee, and bent spinous processes of vertebrae. Studies have shown that there is an ion change in the crystalline structure of the bone where there is where this deformity exists. Now, we all know that the piezoelectric effect is observed whenever the crystalline matrix of the tissue, whether it be bone, it's typically talked about in bone, but also the other tissues, create an ion imbalance and then a rebalancing. This is called the piezoelectric effect, and this is what stimulates osteoblasts and chondrocytes and basically all of the structural cells to rebuild themselves. This piezoelectric effect. So Dr. Goodhart demonstrated that this alteration by showing. Dr. Goodhart demonstrates this alteration by showing that magnets, this is slide number 5 in this group, demonstrates this alteration by showing that magnets can be used to therapy localize to these types of subluxations. Hologramic subluxations are usually located in areas of chronic problems. And there's a list of some typical findings that might lead us to suspect this type of subluxation. Obviously, we want to clear a lot of other more obvious things first, and a lot of times it's when these chronic problems fail to respond to our other techniques that we start looking for it. Say, for example, somebody has a chronic area of their spine that's always stressed. Every time they come in, they've got, like, say, a thoracolumbar area is always stressed, and it might have something to do with their posture or their occupation, or it may have to do with other more remote factors. But nonetheless, those bones are under an abnormal amount of compression and torquing, and they can form these kinds of intraosseous problems. So chronic areas in the spine, subluxations, and of course the mandible is a real common site of these intraosseous subluxations when there's abnormal pulling on the bone. Basically anywhere in the body where, like we mentioned in the last slide, genu valgus, anytime there's abnormal stress on a bone, that bone will start to torque and change shape. And it doesn't match the brain's image of what that bone's supposed to be. Of course, prior surgeries. So in a way, this could intersect well with the concept of IRT. So we therapy localize these areas. There's usually intense tenderness at the level of, say, for example, the spine or the jaw. There'll be intense tenderness where this bent bone subluxation is. Now, the way we find that is we use a 2-point therapy localization on the same bone. So typically, like for a fixation, we would use 2-point therapy localization, one finger on, say, a transverse process and the other hand on the transverse of the vertebrae to above or below, or the spinous process. In this case, we would have one finger towards the TP and one finger on the same vertebrae's SP. And that's how we will find this. So you'll have a strong indicator muscle weakening with this kind of TL. Now, once we find that, that's the therapy localization part. Once we find that, and it's hopefully somewhat verified by the tender spot on the spine, then we correct by challenging, say, for example, the TP and SP away from one another, towards one another, and test for weakening. And then, of course, we have the patient breathe in and breathe out. So it's corrected like a cranial. You go in the challenge direction on the phase of respiration that negated the challenge. So it's here in the slides. There's it's on, see, 1, 2, 3 slides, has the whole protocol. And you can see the arrows there, and I'll demonstrate this too, hopefully in the workshop portion. So this is a typical. Now I have found it in. I find it a lot in the metatarsals, especially the 5th metatarsal. I find it in the tibia. I have found it, basically a lot in the hands. You'll find it in the metacarpals, in the clavicle, and of course, and then in the jaw. It's called here a holographic mandible. So chronic muscle imbalances, the muscles we've just been talking about, pterygoids, internal, external, the masseter, temporalis, these very powerful muscles that exert pressure on the different parts of the jaw. So therapy localization, same thing. You have the patient 2-point therapy localize, ramus and body. And then if you find it, then you would challenge the ramus and body. You would torque it in different directions and look for a strong indicator muscle weakening. And then that would be your correction vector. So you correct in the direction that challenges with the phase of respiration that negated the positive therapy localization. So they're saying therapy localization. That's true. You also, I would, after testing imbalances between the ramus and the body, test for imbalances in the superior-inferior alignment of the ramus. Basically bend the bone any way you can think of, and then test for weakening of strong indicator muscle. Phase of respiration, and that's your correction. And you might find more than one. You just go all around. These slides just are kind of getting, very thorough. So you see the blue dots there have TL. That's where the patient 2-point TLs, and then the challenge direction is the green arrows. These are great slides. I didn't make these slides, but they're really they're done well. And this is one you'll find a lot. We challenge the basically the two bodies apart and together. And there can be intense tenderness at the angle of the jaw. And this is quite common. And that's another indication when you're palpating around the neck and up into the jaw. It's like, whoa, that's really hot. Well, then you might, and then if you find TMJ problems, I'm going to come back to that after I'm done resetting the TMJ and clearing whatever I can with those techniques, and then I'll come back and check for a holographic mandible. A lot of times it's the real finishing touch to the treatment. So this brings us back to some more cranials. So we're going to stop this